Welcome back, my Grots and Gits. Today we are going to be talking about teams in Warhammer 40,000. We're going to be going through all the things that make teams so much better than individuals. In the future of the grim dark of the 41st millennia, there is only war. And if you're going to war, you want to have your best buddies by your sides. So let's get into it and let's talk about teams. All right, teams. In my opinion, this is the way 40,000 is meant to be played. It's infinitely more fun, to me at least, than it is in individuals. Basically, the way it works is you typically will have either teams of 5 or 8 players. You're going to have one faction each per team, right? So you're going to have 5 players. That's going to be 5 separate factions. One of each faction's allowed. So you can't have 2 different Space Marine players. No one Blood Angels, no one Dark Angels team. So when you look at it, you can have things like Grey Knights are typically going to be called chapter divergent. So Grey Knights are excluded for Space Marines. So you could have a Space Marines and a Grey Knights player. And then as far as like Chaos is concerned, Thousand Suns, Death Guard, and World Eaters are considered divergent as well. Since they have their own individual codexes, they're not stuck in the CSN codex as well. So therefore, you can play Chaos Space Marines and play World Eaters. So an average team, like for right now, might look like one Eldar player, one Imperial Knights player, one Custodes player, one Orc player, because you got to have some Orcs, and then you maybe have, I don't know, a Death Watch player or something. So that could be a team. And typically you're going to have either 5 or 8 player per teams. And this is super, super fun. That is the way that we structure our teams. Okay, then in teams events, something that you just have to understand is scoring is a little bit different. Sometimes you have to understand that you winning your match isn't always the most important thing. It is a team event. And overall, you're going to have a overall team score. And the overall team score is what matters for winning the round, not the individual match scores. So we play a little bit differently. Sometimes you might actually play to lose, but you play to lose in such a way that it takes away points from your opponent. So basically the way it works is there are a maximum of 20 points you can score. If you and your opponent tie, it's 10-10. So both teams will get 10 points. If you beat your opponent by, say, 6 points, say you have a 96 victory to a 90, well, then you're going to win by 1 point. So it'll be up 11-9. So the winner will get 11 points. The loser will get 9 points. And so on and so forth, to the point where it's like if you get 100 points and your opponent only gets 60, I think it is, that counts as a 20-0, and that is a crushing defeat. So it's really, really cool because it allows you to plan meticulously how you want to make the matchups. So let's actually kind of talk about the matchups. Let's talk about a pairings process. Essentially what happens is the teams are going to lay down defenders and attackers. So my team of 8 players versus your team of 8 players. We'll call you guys, I don't know, the enemy. And my guys, the heroes of the Imperium. Even though my team's definitely going to have orcs. We're still the heroes in the Imperium. Anyway, so essentially, I'm going to put forth one defender for my team. Let's say we're going to put me down. I play Custodes, and Custodes are a pretty good matchup into every army. Even if I play into Eldar, I can probably still score 3 or 4 points. So they're going to make me the defender. Then my opponent is also going to put down one defender. When we get to see what their defender is, we will choose 2 attackers, and we'll put those cards in front, and the opposing team will also put forth 2 attackers. The defender gets to choose the attacker. So if my team puts me down as the Custodes player to be our first defender, and they give me GSC and Eldar as the 2 attackers, I get to choose who I play against. And at the same time, we will do a roll-off, and whichever team wins the roll-off gets to choose the first table, because if there's going to be 8 members of the team, there's 8 tables to play on. And this is really, really cool, because suddenly what's happening is you can make your army list specifically to tailor to a certain other army list. So I can make, I don't know, just hypothetically, I can make a Custodes list that's made to fight Eldar. But even though Eldar always beat Custodes, if there's a certain terrain setup that can really swing it in my favor, suddenly, but on this terrain setup, my Custodes will beat Eldar. My team putting me forth as the first defender can kind of make it so that I get to choose the terrain setup that lets me win that matchup. So my opponents who think that it's going to be a huge win for them might actually end up with a small loss just because we get to select the terrain. It's very, very cool the way it works, and it adds a huge bit of strategy to the game of Warhammer 40,000. So basically, teams is better than individuals for 4 main reasons. The first is going to be the epic scale. The epic scale is just such a big deal. Picture this. You and your buddies, you combine your armies and you're creating a massive force. It's truly awe-inspiring. There's coordination across the tables, there's synergy, and watching the combined might just lay waste to the enemy. It's absolutely spectacular, and it's so freaking cool. Now, here's the deal. It's not like I have my Space Marines and my Tyranids on the same table. No. It's me versus my enemy. And on that table over there, it's going to be our Dark Eldar player versus Sisters of Battle. So it's not like you're on the same tabletop while you're playing, but it's important to know that you might have, I don't know, one of your teammates over here has a very favorable matchup. Say it's Custodes versus Grey Knights. We know Custodes are going to beat Grey Knights. So in your matchup where you think you're a little bit screwed, say you're playing Thousand Suns and GSC are going into you and you're like, oh crap, how do I beat GSC as Thousand Suns? It can be okay. And it can change the way that you play, because suddenly you're not playing to win the match anymore. You're playing to lose by as little as possible, because you know your teammate over here is going to get a really big win. So if you lose by just a little bit instead of a lot, so you don't take any risks, you play very safe, and your opponent's frustrated because they can only beat you, say, by 15 points to 5 points instead of a 20 to 0. Suddenly you won the game for your team even by losing, and it is a really, really cool kind of way to get to play the game. All right, let's talk about the epic scale. 8 versus 8 is going to be a minimum of 16 players. When I go to the WTC in a few weeks, and we're going to talk about the WTC in a future video, there's going to be 36 full teams. That is a ton of players. I think it's like 288 players if I do the quick math in my head. Maybe I'm a little wrong on that. So in one team, you can have Imperial Knights just blasting the Tyranids, backed up by Bloodthirsters who are running the lines of Sisters of Battle in another matchup. It's very, very cool. Now, one other thing that makes this so freaking exciting is the fact that the army lists that you see at teams events are very different than the army lists that you see at individual tournaments. Because at a teams list, you can actually take an army that has 0 anti-tank capabilities. Because due to the way that the pairings process is set up, we can kind of hide your army and make sure that you don't run into any tank-heavy armies. So you have basically only anti-infantry, so we're going to pair you into the infantry-heavy list, which is really, really cool. But it's not necessarily a sure thing, because the opposing team is going to be trying to find the best matchups for their list as well. But even so, you're going to see some really different types of lists at team tournaments than you will ever see at individuals. And some of these different types of army lists that you can construct are super freaking fun to play as, and they're very, very strong because you get to hide their weaknesses by not putting them into bad matchups. I absolutely love it, and I'm pretty darn confident you would love it too when you go to your very first team event. All right, camaraderie and the flexible game plans. This is also very cool. Whenever you play, anyone who was ever playing sports in high school or in college, you understand this. Playing with a team is freaking fun, even if you were played individualized sports. So, for example, I was on the wrestling team in high school and college. I also played soccer, football for you Europeans, and so wrestling was a very different sport because it was individual. It was you versus your opponent, but I still had my team behind me, and it was absolutely awesome. It was actually kind of like Warhammer in a weird way, because even if I lost my match, then it didn't mean that we lost the overall match. Right? So you got to rely on your teammates to pick up slack for others, or you got to pick up the slack for some of your teammates. It was very, very cool. When you play with your friends, it's more fun. Just bottom line. And that's just it. Now, one of another really cool things about having your teammates there with you is, let's say you're about to run into an army that you have 0 experience into. Well, guess what? You have 30 to 45 minutes before your match starts, so you go to the the guy on your team who's an expert in the enemy's army that you're about to play, and they teach you how to beat them. Just then and there, it's like, okay, this is how we do it. This is what we do. We always like to go to events with our teammates. Even when I play individual events, I like to go with some of my teammates. Maybe we're not in a team for that tournament, but I still go with them because we get to consult and help each other in between while we're trying to prepare for matchups. And you always have that support system with you when you're preparing for a team event, and it is freaking awesome. One other really kind of a cool thing that I mentioned briefly earlier, but I want to expand upon it, is occasionally you actually might have to lose a game. And if this is an individuals event, suddenly now you're no longer the running for placing, and it's just not fun because crap, I got a matchup I can't win. I might as well not even play. But it's not true for teams, because every single point differential that you make matters a really big deal. I've been to a team event where I got thrown under the bus. I had no chance of winning. They were putting me into, oh crap, what was it? I think it was unnerved Harlequins, and I just had 0 chances of winning this matchup. However, my goal wasn't to win. My goal was to score 1 point. And remember, it's a 20-point differential, but to score 1 point against my opponent. Because if I scored 1 point against my opponent, that would make it possible for the rest of my team to overperform in their matchups and win the overall match. So I still had an extremely fun match. And I really overperformed. I ended up scoring about 3 points for my team, which might sound like not that great, but trust me, against unnerfed Harlequins at the time, 3 points was a really big deal. And actually, I ended up winning the round for our team. So even by losing, I was able to win it for the team. And that was so darn cool. So sometimes, yeah, you get thrown under the bus because we're going to give you a terrible matchup, but it's really a sign of respect because we know you're going to be able to score at least something that's going to help us in the long run. And that is such an amazing freaking feeling. Then we get to work on our learning and our improvement. So your team, let's say you're a little bit newer and you're not really super ready to be thrown into the deep end, into the hyper competitive. So our team can actually hide you a little bit and we can throw you into the matchups that you have a really good matchup. So it's a way to get you competitively into the hobby, but perhaps we're giving you a very favorable matchup that makes it a little bit easy to forgive some of your beginner mistakes. And that's very, very cool. Terrain is also a big part of this because since we select the terrain, we can give you, let's say we put you into a really hard matchup, we can give you a table because we alternate who chooses the table. We can put you in one of the slots where we get to choose the table, and we'll let you choose the table that gives you the best opportunity against a superior foe. And that is very, very awesome. And then not to mention, you're always going to be playing different armies. It's not like you're playing with your best friend and every single match you have is Dark Angels versus Necrons. Dark Angels versus Necrons. These are the only games we play all year. We play 27 games a year, and it's always Dark Angels versus Necrons. That doesn't happen when you're in teams, because when you're practicing with your team, you're playing across a variety of different armies all the times, and then when you go to the actual team event, you know for a fact that there are going to be at least 8 different armies, or 5 different if it's a 5-man team event, that you're going to be potentially paired against. And it's very darn fun because it's always new and exciting. Then we have game balance and metagame experience. And we're almost done here. But this is actually a really important thing to talk about. Playing in a team's matchup actually helps to balance the game. Because one of the things, now I love Warhammer 40,000, and I accept, much like most of us accept, that the game is always going to be a little bit unbalanced. And it kind of should be, because that's one of the things that breathes the life into the game. If it was not unbalanced at all, then there would be one list to take, and everyone would take the same list, and that would be really, really boring. The fact that we have counters and counter-counters in the game is a really good thing. Unfortunately, at the beginning of certain new editions, occasionally you might have one faction that is just heads and shoulders above the other factions. Eldari! Or even some things like GSC and Imperial Knights. And we know they're a bit of a problem. But one of the cool things about teams is that you can account for that problem, where you might not be able to account for it in an individuals. Right now, if you're trying to go to a GT or a Super Major for individuals and you are planning on trying to win, basically you have to take Eldar or GSC. That's kind of your options. You kind of have to take one of those. Not true for teams, because right now we know that GSC actually counter Eldar pretty well. So if our opponent puts down Eldar, what my team might do is we might put down GSC and another list that we've made specifically to handle Eldar. So our opponents don't really have a good option. They're going to have to choose a really good counter into Eldar or another quite good counter into Eldar. And that can actually make for a really close game in that overpowered matchup. So the process of teams actually solves these balance issues in a really cool and interesting way. Once again, one of the reasons why I think teams is absolutely the way that Warhammer 40,000 is meant to be played. Same thing for AOS, by the way. Absolutely same thing for AOS. This is great. This is just fantastic. Okay, then I think let's just talk about the very last thing, and then I'm going to close up for the day. Sorry, I went backwards. What does team solve? So kind of like we just spoke, it solves balance problems. Kind of. There are still balance problems in the game, yes, but they're much less brutal in the team's environment. So it kind of solves the balance problems, and that is a really, really good thing. It solves list building problems because, well, you know what? I want to do these really fun and crazy wonky things with my list, but I can't because you always have to have a balanced list ready to play against all comers. Well, in teams, that's not necessarily true. In teams, if I want to take 3 Gorkanauts, damn it, I can actually build a list where I take 3 Gorkanauts, and I can do really cool things with it. Now, but don't take my word as law right there. That doesn't necessarily mean everyone should run out there and take 3 Gorkanauts to every team event. Doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be great. But the intent behind it is that you can build really funky lists and teams that work really well because they're designed to serve a very specific purpose that you could never get away with in individuals. It solves the bad matchups, and honestly, guys, and this is real. It solves loneliness. It's really fun to get to go to events. Let's say you fly, because I'm gonna go with 7, 8, 9 people out to Belgium because there's 8 players for our team and Team Norway, and then we got 2 coaches who are going with us. So 11 people. My wife's going too. I'm really excited to have her there, but she's gonna get really bored watching Warhammer. But so we're gonna have 11 people going. Guys, we're flying to Belgium, and we're going to be there with our best friends because we are preparing for this together. Like, we're all friends. We enjoy it. So we're going to be there with our friends. This is not going to be a lonely experience. This is going to be a super social event. It's going to be an absolute blast, and I freaking cannot wait for it. And then lastly, one of the things that Team solves is the pressure to perform. When I go to an individual event, I'm there and I'm having fun, but I'm also hyper-focused on winning because I'm a pretty competitive player. Don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean I'm a jerk. I'm actually really nice to all my opponents. We always have really good games, but generally the tournament is fun after I lose my first match. Until then, I'm so hyper-focused on trying to win. It's just what it is. Here, I'm not necessarily hyper-focused on winning. I'm hyper-focused on accomplishing the goal that I have to accomplish. So if my goal for my matchup is I have to score 5 points, that's what I'm hyper-focused on, which is really, really cool. It takes some of the pressure off of you. You don't have to dominate every single match. You do still have to do your job, but you don't have to win everything. And that is one of the ways that keeps this game super fun and fresh. So if you guys haven't given Teams a try, I highly recommend it. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking to you more about the WTC because it is the single largest Teams tournament in the world, and it's freaking awesome. I can't wait to go. And so I'm going to kind of give you the layout for how that goes to give you a little bit more information about Teams. But if you've never played a Teams tournament, I highly encourage it. It is a great way to get beginners into the hobby. It's a great way to breathe new life into it for you veterans. Teams is the way the game is meant to be played, and I absolutely love it. I would love to hear your ideas. If you guys like Teams, put them down in the comments section. I, as always respond to basically every comment that comes through. And until next time, my happy crumpin' wargamers, crump on and enjoy life, baby. See you next time.